Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm Gary Polland. This week's co-host is Sonny Messiah-Jiles. Good to see you, Sonny.
Thank you.
This week we're going to be discussing something very interesting. In Texas, at least, we've finally gotten over the political season. I'm sure it'll be gone for at least a month, but hopefully more.
Really?
And we're going to talk about public policy, something that is very important in Texas. And by the way, that's what politics is all about. So we brought together for you today two very important players from Austin who care more about public policy than the average politician, and I could say that, and I think Sonny agrees with me. First, Gene Wu, Texas State House, District 137, and also here today, State Senator Paul Bettencourt, Senate District 7, both I can happily say re-elected, and these are both two outstanding public servants.
Which is a rarity for a Republican.
Yeah, this year.
At least this time around.
That's right.
But now that the politics have hopefully ended in terms of Texas, can we let's talk about legislative priorities and senators. I guess you have a bigger pulpit, so we'll let you go first, Senator Bettencourt. What are the priorities as you see it for this next legislative session?
Well, Lieutenant Governor's already sent out the word on three priorities, which is teacher pay, school safety, and property tax relief. So I'm happy to be back with a property tax relief plan. And I think with the change in speakership, we've got a real chance of passing property tax relief under Speaker Bonin that we didn't have when the House was under Speaker Strauss.
Representative Wu, what are your priorities as you see it going into the session?
I really can't disagree with the senator, but he has a funny way of saying school finance reform, and school finance reform.
Exactly. Three different ways.
Those are all under one thing that I know. That's my priority for the House. My personal priority, I'm looking really to work on more CPS reforms, given the Fifth Circuit's ruling that the state needs to keep doing more. I'm looking to hopefully do more and to get more money into the system and to make more reforms. And I'm hoping to really work on some comprehensive juvenile justice reform to deal with a lot of kids who are both in CPS and in the criminal justice system.
Well, let me first mention, you talked about school finance reform, and both of y'all mentioned it. What are the type of plans we're talking about that's going to finance and hopefully improve our schools? Because one of the things you read, we have HISD, basically unmanageable, a school board that's totally dysfunctional. The kids are just not doing well. At least that's my take.
Paul has a special plan, and he's got something that's really...
Let me tell you something. By any standard of fairness, I understand the HISD school board is not functional.
Amen.
Now, there's two factions on it, and when the factions get to a board meeting and they start hurling racial epithets at each other in public, that's dysfunctional. Now, I've got a bill that's going to change the number of seats from just pure district election to at-large, because they need people to think about the whole district, not just about their district, their own individual district. Fair. And I think that there's going to be a House companion to it. I don't want to pre-announce it because that person will have it in their own good time. But the important thing is we got to make sure that we do real things for real people and straighten out real problems. Now, on public school finance, I've been on the Commission for Public School Finance for the better part for the whole year. We have found some great things about public education that are happening, but there's some improvement that we need to make. And one of the things that we have to do is we've got to get the state budget weaned off of Robin Hood. As values go up, tax rates need to come down or people don't get property tax relief. But as values go up, the state benefits dramatically in the state budget. And our estimate for next session is that the state will get they'll be able to keep $6.4 billion that they would otherwise had to have given out in education. So we've got to wean off of Robin Hood, because as a conservative, I would want that money back into taxpayers. A more liberal person may say, put that money back into schools, but there's no consensus on keeping that money for somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but the reality is, if you look at the tax situation and you say, okay, we're going to reduce or limit the percentage of property tax, who's going to pick up the difference that's going to be left for schools? I mean, because the state is going to need to get that money from somewhere. Are you proposing that it come from the Robin Hood?
Well, I think we got to stop robbing the hood. Okay? Because that's what we're doing, Sonny. Okay. Right, yeah, thank you. Right, give me a rim shot on that one. Okay. And if we stop robbing the hood, then the good things happen. Because here's what the real problem is. we've had two good conservative budgets in a row. We've increased the state general revenue spending by about less than 4%, and then last time when we were in a recessionary mode, less than 1%. If we buckle down at the state level, we have the resources to get off of Robin Hood, and if we do things better, faster, quicker, cheaper, which means that money, it could go back to the taxpayers or stay in the school system. But whatever that ratio split would be, if Gene and I got together and we negotiated it, it's better than a bunch of state departments spending the money. And that's the problem right now. And believe me, I've been watching the numbers. The recapture numbers are taking an alarming curve straight up. So we have to act, and we need to act in this session.
And look, I'll absolutely agree with my friend here who says that we shouldn't just, just do whatever with the money. The money should either go back to the taxpayers or go into the school system. I say it should go into the schools, back into the school system, because Texas is already one of the worst funded public education systems in the entire nation. But here's the thing. We're not going to be able to wean ourselves off of Robin Hood. Robin Hood was created in order to fix the systemic problems that we created ourselves by passing a cap on a ban on statewide property tax and the whole way we structure school finance, period. Unless we undo the entire system, we cannot get rid of Robin Hood. Here's the thing. For whatever it's worth, Robin Hood actually ends up helping a lot of Republican areas like Spring, like Pasadena. Those places would be dead if it were not for Robin Hood, because that money that comes from out of HISD, comes out of Houston, ends up going to the rural counties, ends up going to these large suburban areas.
But Gene, you're looking at something, the glass half full, half empty, when it really can be half full. First off, the problem with Robin Hood, it really is Robin the Hood. So HISD, Deer Park, Dallas ISD, you name it, there's hundreds of school districts in this now. Now look, it's a 25-year-old formula that can be adjusted. You could do things for fast growth districts that are separate. You could make a whole bunch of other changes, but here's the fundamental problem. The state spends less in education every time property values increase. So when I'm arguing for tax relief, I'm asking the cities and the counties and the MUDs, everybody else, as values go up, cut the property tax rate. We have to do the same thing in the state, because if not, that money never gets to education, and it gets spent by hundreds of other state departments, and so we're blowing it. So we can stop it by freezing it, and then over a decade or whatever it takes, we have got to get rid of it.
What fundamentally this will take is for the state, meaning the legislature and the governor, to step up and pay its fair share of the burden of school financing. We tried to do that last session with a $3 billion addition to public education. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Governor held that bill hostage and then ended up shooting it.
No, well, okay, but what really happened was that you were skipping a payment on the school finance deals, and so we actually used a different tool, which was the transportation number. Now, the good news is that we're going to have a rainy day fund of $11 billion. We've had a rainy day. We're going to pay off all these one-time expenditures, whatever tricks we've had in the past to balance the budget. We're going to get rid of it, and then but the way to do it is to stop telling the public that that Robin Hood's a good thing. It's a terrible thing. It needs to stop.
All right, so you talked about state spending that has been funded by the diversion of the money from the school districts to the state, reducing the state's percentage. This means local taxpayers to school taxes are funding state government to some extent.
Yes,
so if we weed
no, that's it. And this next session was going to be $6.4 billion.
Okay, so $6.4 billion. If let's say we take that off the table, is there $6.4 billion in wasteful, fat-based spending at the state that we can eliminate and nobody will miss it except those working there?
Where are you going to find it,
until we
basically?
started giving tax breaks to everybody's friend.
So
that's not a joke.
That's a way
No,
to do
that's
that.
real.
Because in 2013, when my first session there, we had a surplus. What do? We gave tax breaks to everybody. Everybody who had a lobbyist friend, they got a tax break. Right? If you ran a telecom center, even though there's only 2 of them in the state, we gave them tax breaks, $25 million tax break. And everybody that had a lobbyist friend got a tax break. Until we're ready to stop doing that, we can't fund anything.
Explain to me how school vouchers fit in this school finance issue.
They do
because
not.
on one side you got folks saying, okay, for those kids who go to low performing schools, this will give them opportunity to go to better schools. On the flip side, you have those saying, well, the rich people want some of their tax money back so they can send their kids or subsidize their private school payments.
But Sonny,
Because I hear Gene saying it's no
well,
connection.
Gene said no, so let me tell you why there's a yes.
Okay.
All right. It's not about rich people anymore. 60% of the public education school children nearly can qualify for free and reduced lunch. Texas is a majority minority state. We're looking at low social economic kids that are in poverty is the only marker that I've seen on 8 months of study that tells me that if you're in poverty, you've got bad test scores. Now, what does charter schools and things and other alternatives do? Competition breeds better outcomes for everybody. Now, here's why. In fact, we just heard it in my subgroup yesterday up in Austin. If you take the charter school money and you could actually take that off your recapture, then the first thing that is means all that money is staying in your charter schools in your area. But more importantly, we have tremendous public-private partnerships between charter schools and ISDs. Alamo ISD has a tremendous program from a bill that Senator Menendez and I co-authored that passed both the House and the Senate. Spring Branch ISD has a great laboratory working with KIPP and YES academies over in Landrum Middle School and Northbrook High School, because the new ideas are in the private sector. So, and the public sector has a bunch of excess capacity, and here's why. Enrollment in Austin is down. Enrollment in Houston ISD is down. Enrollment in the other big ISDs are down. So we've got extra school space. So filling them up with people that are teaching new methods and ways of learning. And then don't be afraid to partner with them.
Well, go ahead, Gene, because I want to hear why you say no.
That's like saying, you know what, you're sick. We're gonna give your food to someone else because you'll feel better after we take your food away, right? It's gonna help you lose some weight. Texas schools are already one of the worst funded school systems in the entire nation. We have some of the lowest performing scores across the board. I mean, our competitors are Mississippi and Louisiana. Okay,
Okay.
And it's
downstairs.
disgusting.
By the way,
No, wait,
Gene,
wait.
downstairs.
You've been talking about this the whole time.
Okay, Gene,
So, and
downstairs
you
in my
asked me-
car, I've got the data that shows where we are on third grade reading and where we are on eighth grade arithmetic. And those scores are, especially when you social economically adjust them for the population,
Yeah, but
we're
Paul, you
up in the
penny-pinch.
15. No, but third grade reading and eighth grade math, that's like what you have to
I'm
do
not
to
saying
survive.
that's not important,
This
but
is
that's like a
selective
drop, and you've
data.
been very selective on that
Yeah,
data.
selective data
Let's go
points.
big picture. Let's
Here's
go
the thing.
real world.
People are leaving public schools across the state because the families see how badly their schools are funded. We have teachers who spend their own money, their own meager paychecks, to buy school supplies. That's outrageous. That is outrageous for a
I've
civilized
had a
society.
bill on that for 2 sessions.
Why didn't you go somewhere?
I'd love for the House to. I'd love to get a House sponsor.
And-
but right,
You
so
can
maybe
broker
I
it
just
before
found
right
one.
here.
Now look, but let's look at the rating scale that came out. Okay, we've got schools now, and we got districts rated A, B, C, D, and F. Okay, the amount of D's and F's are actually a small percentage, like 15% of the whole scoring system. Now, we've already had calls like, I'm a B, what do I have to do to get to an A? When you recognize the obvious and you look at getting money into the classroom, because the lieutenant governor, which you've hit on 2 or 3 times, his number one issue is teacher pay. I think we need to have teacher performance pay. I'd love for teachers, in fact, in Dallas right now, there's a program
Dallas
called
is the
ACE.
model.
We've got teachers making $92,000 a year. In Dallas, we've got P-TECH and Promise, where Dallas ISD works with Dallas Community Schools and American Airlines and IBM, and they're in low social economics high schools. 98% low social economic high schools, and they're graduating
And
kids
I
in
don't
an
have
astonishing
a
way.
problem. I don't have a problem with.
And HISD is just hurling epitaphs at each other. With leadership, you've got the resources. You can fix the problem.
So, when we passed the bill to do the performance required schools, when HISD first started, they had something like 60, 70 schools that were underperforming. In the 4 or 5 years since then, we've got them down to like 7. You know, with a few that are on the very edges of that are either just coming on or just coming off, but they don't expect to be on there. There's been marked improvement in our schools statewide, but this is the argument that I run into of all.
I agree.
This is the argument that I run into.
He says you're proving his
This is
point.
the argument that I run into all of my Republican friends when they say, "Well, money is not the solution." Well, money's not. They say that. Then why are we talking about teacher pay? If they talk about why do we not have a universal pre-K? Why do we not have free lunches across the state for kids when we are at 68% free lunch across the state? My district is about 97% free lunch. A lot of what we tried to do in our bill last session that the lieutenant governor killed, okay, was to redo the formulas.
Well, the speaker killed our bill, so we're even. Go ahead.
Hey.
Well, was to redo the formulas to give more weights to local schools that had more difficult populations, that had populations that that had English as a second language, that came from more impoverished environments, that came from more difficult neighborhoods, and we tried to get that funding formula that would have helped schools that were in low performing zones. You know,
So are you going to revisit that? Are you talking about
No,
bringing that back, or
look,
how is it going to be packaged?
I love the debate with Gene because he's passionate, he's got a good public policy position. I think I've got a better one, but that's okay. That's what the legislature is about. But I think clearly we're going to have a real discussion about school finance. And the new incoming speaker, Dennis Bonham, has indicated that. We've had a bunch of interim work from the lieutenant governor, Patrick, and of course Governor Abbott has talked about as well. I think a comprehensive solution could take 2 sessions, but there's going to be a lot of things that come out of this session right away.
When we talk about the state budget, is the school spending and medical care, is that the 2 drivers of the budget?
75% of what we do now.
All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about medical care. State's share of medical care, Medicaid, et cetera. Gene, is that still running, the numbers still running off the charts?
Yeah,
explosive?
I mean, the numbers are off the charts because the state is growing off the charts. It's simply put. If you have a lot of people, then you need to spend a lot of money on taking care of them. It's the same thing with education and the same thing with medical care. It's like saying, you know, you're unhappy about how much you're spending on your food budget. Well, if you have more people in your family, you got to pay for the food.
Eat less.
Right?
And by the way, Health and Human is
Well,
now,
Eat less.
right. Eat less. Well, I wish I could. Now,
Oh, my God.
I've been trying, and I actually did. I've had some improvement, and now here come the holidays. Now, here's what the problem is. Okay, just like the holidays coming up, you've got a huge explosion in Health and Human expenditures that are actually going to forever put them higher than all the sum of education, because that's just the way the governmental budgets are going. Now, one of the things I know Gene's been active on is Child Protective Services, and there are some aspects of Health and Human Services that, I mean, needed some serious reform. He's actually optimistic that one of the departments is working better. And we really need to look at every department to make sure that they do zero-based budgeting and they take care of their customers and they use taxpayer money wisely. Because that's the biggest red state in the union. That's what everybody would expect us to do. But more importantly, it's because that's the right way to get out of this problem, because we're talking billions and billions. Carl Sagan was wrong. It's like tens of billions and tens of billions now. That's what we're spending in Health and Human.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and we still may be in real trouble with Medicaid, with Medicare. The reimbursement rates have dropped session after session, and provider after provider is leaving the system.
It is.
At some point, the system is going to collapse.
Because there'll be no
There's
doctors.
no question.
Yeah, there's going to be no doctors who will be willing to take it anyways.
Well, that's in some ways true about Medicare too. It's hard to find a primary
And
physician.
depending on what the White House does, and depending on what Congress does, they could make the problem significantly worse.
Well, the one
You can
good
bet
news-
on it almost.
Well, the one good news, Sonny, I would say that, but the way the Congress and the House and the Senate's looking, I don't think they're going to be agreeing on
I
much.
was
So
just
the
gonna-
odds of anything happening are low. at this
Oh, I
point.
thought you were going to say impeachment.
No, how did
look,
you
look.
know? Right. Okay. I don't think they'd agree on that one either, Gene. But that's
That
a
ain't
good
going
one.
to go anywhere. But you know, we had the federal government under President Obama had their Medicaid new formula that for the first number of years they were going to pay a significant percentage, additional monies to the states, but then over time it was going to drop and end up in the states' lap ultimately. Do you think that's still something we need to revisit, or is there another way to go?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we still have about 1 million Texans uninsured who could be insured. And I mean, again, the whole argument with Obamacare, the whole argument for ACA is like, look, it's more expensive to deal with people once they're dying. It's more expensive to deal with people once they're in the ER. If we can deal with problems like a diabetes that is easily treatable and cheap to treat at the outset, but really, really expensive when you have to cut off someone's foot, right?
Right, and look, the governor of Minnesota said that it couldn't work. That's a strong Democrat. The governor of Ohio said that it's not working, and that's a Republican, John Kasich. Look, and I expect that the Democrats in the federal Congress will immediately pass a bill that they reaffirm pre-existing conditions. You know, the Republicans tried to do a direct repeal. But this issue is going to continue to brew, and it's really going to have to be solved at a federal level.
I got a question for him. I want you to play a game with me right quick, a for and against, okay? You ready? Okay. Loosening marijuana laws in Texas, for or against?
For.
Against.
Okay. We're getting rid of daylight savings time.
For.
Don't care.
Okay, that's right.
Reduce or eliminate franchise tax. Franchise tax.
I would love to be for that.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Okay.
I'm probably on the same page. I'm undecided on it. Depends how we do it.
We have the only gross receipts tax in the country. Even Oregon abandoned it because it's preposterously bad.
And the question is, if you get rid of it, what's going to replace it?
Yeah,
This is
right,
true.
right, right.
Okay.
We don't have any magic beans.
There's an amendment requiring that the state fund at least half the cost of funding public schools.
You know what? The local share is half right now.
It's more than half.
No. When you look at it with federal recapture and
So
state,
for or against?
we're around. I mean, we're really close to that number right now if you measure everything.
Against, because I want the state to have more than 50% share.
Okay.
I want the local property taxes to be lower.
Exempting college textbooks from sales tax
For.
1 week in August and 1 week in January.
What, exempting them?
Exempting the college textbooks from sales tax.
Okay, well, gee, they could join a whole variety of items that could be exempted, but go ahead.
Okay, and helping charter.
And tampons.
Okay, and helping charter schools get more funding. For or against?
I'm a yes on that.
I am neutral on that. I think the charter schools are funded pretty well as it is. We gave them extra money for infrastructure fund last time. I'm neutral on that.
Okay.
One of the
That was it.
The show is rapidly coming to a conclusion, but I did want to talk about one of the areas that you two are working on, which is juvenile justice reform.
Yep.
A passion for Gene, and you and Senator Bettencourt have met on this and are making progress and coming together with some really good ideas. So talk about where you all want to go with this.
As in the legislature, I yield to my expert.
Well, I think this is one of the areas where this is truly a bipartisan effort. I think this is a place where we can save money,
Sure.
we can do better for our communities, and we can have better outcomes for our community. And we want to look at, there's a Chronicle report just a couple of weeks ago saying how, 2 of our judges sent 96% of the kids to TJJD.
Take it a little out of context.
But still, Harris County sends the bulk of kids to prison.
Biggest county.
Those are $173,000 a year apiece.
That's it. You would like to
Okay,
eliminate
as an
that.
economic conservative, I agree. I don't want to
Eliminate.
spend $173,000 a year per year.
There's better-
if
there's a
there's a
better
better
way.
idea.
And
I
our
yield to
county-
Gene on this.
When our
Okay.
counties
Thank you.
could do a better job of providing mental health care and behavioral modification for these kids and do it at a significantly cheaper
And closer to the
rate.
families, too.
Exactly.
Because we want to cut recidivism down.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
if they get into that program, and then the next step up is armed robbery, murder,
Right.
et cetera.
Right.
So we need to do the right economic thing, which is to get in early with a better treatment program that costs less.
And a lot of this is tied to CPS. A lot of the kids in the juvenile justice system are in the CPS system, and we want to take care of the kids who have been abused and neglected.
So this is an example of where, at least in Texas, we can have bipartisan
Absolutely.
efforts together on public
Hallelujah.
policy.
By the way,
send a message to Washington. Maybe
Out of 1,600 votes in the Senate, only 26 were along party lines, pure party lines. So really in Texas, regardless of what happens in Washington, people like Gene and I meet, In the Senate, we actually eat in the same lunchroom and we talk about ideas. Because if you listen, that's the first step to doing the right thing for Texas.
So do we anticipate this session is going to be more successful in terms of substantive legislation that will actually help the state go forward?
I think so, because last session was a logjam, just like it was up in Washington. This time, I think we're going to have some narrow focus, but more success.
Well, that was the last word, Gene. I'm sorry, time is up. Thank you, Senator Bettencourt. Thank you, Representative Wu. A very interesting discussion, and as I say, an example for people in Washington of how our elected officials need to behave when the politics end. Sonny, always a pleasure seeing you. You added grace and great questions right for the show. We'll be back next week with another exciting and important show. Thanks for watching.